Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, people of all races, colors, and creeds, welcome back to the greatest show on earth. Greg Anthony here on the Investigative Journal, the long-running show getting to things that people just can't believe. Sometimes they even call me a conspiracy theorist, but what really is that? Well, I'll get to that in a minute. Greg Anthony here, like I said, FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Stay tuned for a full hour of great news you're not going to get. Well, perhaps you'll get it elsewhere, but just in a little bit different form. I get a little bit deeper. I don't believe the left and the right actually hate each other. Well, on the surface they do. But really, they work together. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. I've talked about it on my show for many years. We've been doing this, and I've been telling this story since 2004 when I first went on the air. And let me tell you something. It is one of the biggest mistakes in a person's life if they don't listen to it. Because from the beginning, I mentioned that, like Mark Twain, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. Now, what I mean by that is that's exactly what the mainstream media does. They ignore facts that have been hidden in history. They ignore the real controllers of what we call the New World Order. And so I try to fill in those pieces. And what I said in the beginning still stands true today, that it's not a conspiracy theory when you can back it up with facts. Facts that, of course, will be disputed, but isn't that the way for the First Amendment was formed? For diverse opinions, for diverse thoughts? So why? Tell me why. Stations that carry shows like mine always pull them off the air. And the reason is because there's something about hiding the truth that we try to get to here. Now, you hear a lot of stations on the internet talk about the truth. Yeah, they talk about, oh, we give you the real truth. But you know, I don't like to look at it that way. I just like to look at it as facts. Let's give you some facts. Some solid evidence, including circumstantial evidence, that what I say here has a reason to be in the public forum, has a reason to be out there, listen to millions, so people can make up their own minds. You know, I'm not an evangelist journalist. You know, that's what some people call me. Well, you're evangelizing this kind of Jesuit-led Vatican New World Order and all their minions in the government, whether they be Donald Trump, Obama, or George Bush. I'm not at all that. In fact, I don't even like evangelists, to be honest with you. You know, I think people, just like horses, can be led to the water, but you can't force them to drink. And so my idea is this, both in the spiritual world and in the political world. Give a person an opportunity to measure everything, to make up his own mind, and not to force him into a lot of faith-believing or political-believing ideas that are just ramrodded down their throat because a person supposedly is an expert or supposedly is a grand pastor or the Pope, for example. If you take these people by their word, you will be led right to the gates of hell. And let me tell you that. Whether there's a hell or not, you don't believe in it, you're going to be led somewhere you're not going to want to go. So basically what I've done on this show is present a lot of different facts. Of course, occasionally my opinions seep through because I get so damn frustrated that this show can't be on the air in more places. Because as anyone would say, you know, I'm trying to get this message to as many people as possible without getting killed, if you know what I mean. Because the people I talk about like to do that. Because they have to control the narrative. They have to control history. They have to control everything in order to get you to the point of their liking. And that is this, control. And how do you do that? Well, you take 50 states and you make the state laws a little bit more lukewarm than the hot feds, right? So the federal government grows like a bad weed and usurps local and state power because it's easier to control people with one authority ruling, right? Now, the best way to do that is if you can do it throughout most of the world, right? That'd be a lot easier. And in that case, you don't need people to really want to talk about things like this or bring things on the table that I do. Look, I don't do anything that's really different than some of the broadcasters on the left and right. They evangelize their view. You're seeing it more and more every day in American journalism. And their views sometimes need to be dissected. And so what I like to do is dissect the left and the right and show you that they actually work together with a higher power controlling them and actually telling them what to do. So the story I've been telling for all these years, since 2004, is very simple, and it's going to lead up to one little thing, the destruction of America, unless, see, the clock's ringing. You don't have much time. How much time do we have? 10 strokes of the clock until it's all over, right? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But anyway, what I'm getting at is the left and the right work together. And the story I've been telling you is that it's going to lead to the destruction of America eventually. Now when, where, how, and why, I can't give you everything. But I'm going to tell you, if you start looking deeper at some of the connections between spiritualism, the papacy, and governments of the world, you're going to find an interesting story that you're never going to forget in your life. And one day, it'll lead you closer to what they call, getting to the bottom of things, peeling away the onion, right? So it goes without saying that what they're doing today in Iran, we have to talk about it. What they're doing in Iran today is just another theatrical performance. You can't look at it any other way. Because if you really dissect Iran, who's controlling that organization? Who's controlling all these terrorists? Let's go back to 9/11. We've shown on this show many times, the facts can lead up and you can make a great argument. I mean, more than reasonable doubt. You can go way beyond that and say it was an inside job. The government facts just don't add up. I've listened to all of them. Listened to all the facts of the people who said 9/11's an inside job, as well as talking to many of the family members who lost loved ones, talking to many people who are on the scene in New York, and spending a couple years dedicated to really find out what the hell happened in 2001. And what it did was it opened the doors to this conflict going on in the Middle East. It opened up a lot of things. It closed a lot of things in America. When I mentioned that the Patriot Act, remember that, took away a lot of your rights. And people say, well, who cares if you're innocent? Well, I don't need if a cop comes to my door. I'll just let him in. I got nothing to hide. That's not the point. The point is, there'll come a day when they'll come after you if you disagree with them. Now, getting to the point of 9/11 and moving on, because most people don't want to talk about it anymore. There's too many things going on. For example, isn't it one thing after another? Look, just about a year ago, all of a sudden the Democratic Party turns into a bunch of socialists. How did that happen? Well, who the hell created socialism? And do you really know the different forms of it and who did it and what they're planning? Well, some people said, well, look to Marx and Engels and all that kind of stuff. And I say, well, go a little bit farther back. And they go, how far? I said, well, I'm not going to take you back to the cavemen, but I will take you back to the 1600s and what's called the Paraguay experiments. And when you start reading that, you'll understand that it was the Black Robes, the Jesuits, who started that, who actually honed down an idea that was pushed into government of other countries, socialist governments. And you saw it spread. Where did it start? Right from them. Who would you go to for advice then? Well, the people that have been doing this for 400 or 500 years, right? Or know about it, written about it. Perhaps, picked Marx and Engels to push it. Perhaps wrote a lot of things. There's a lot of good facts out there. Let's just shift to the other side of the coin, to white nationalism and Nazism. There's a lot of facts that show you that Mein Kampf wasn't written by Hitler. There's a lot of solid facts that also show you that Hitler's boss was none other than Pope Pius XII. So anyway, I'm trying to show you that by mixing spiritualism, the papacy, the world of religion, occult, and also all of the ancient religions, mix it up with the political doings, the political ideas going on now, and also all of the things behind the scenes with pedophilia. Not only, you're living on a different planet if you haven't heard of Epstein. But then again, look at what's happened in the Catholic Church. Priest after priest after priest. And it's still going on. And if you check back to a lot of my stories, we covered that in depth. Covered a lot of these genocides that seem to be government, rebels fighting the government, etc., etc. But there has to be an instigator, and so we try to find out who that is. And so I can't go through it all now, but that's why my shows need to be listened to in the past. Go back and check it out, and I'll try to take you slowly through it again, piece by piece. And like I said, did I say it? I don't know. I have a big announcement about my show coming up in the second half hour, so stay tuned. Now, Iran. Let's talk about it just a bit. Iranian threats, of course, are flying and flying after Soleimani was killed, right? The powerful head of Iran's terrorist force, I call it. He was killed during an American strike at Baghdad International Airport. And this was after the embassy was attacked. Now, Soleimani has a long and sordid past of killing many Americans, deaths of hundreds, and wounding thousands of Americans with his planned terrorist attacks. And we see now the escalation of a possible war between the United States, Iran, and all of her proxy organizations and governments. Hezbollah, etc. And we're seeing the alignment now of Israel and America. And we're watching in America a deep split between whether we should go after them with force for what they're doing or whether we should lay back. Well, let me tell you, if you look at each of these presidents in the last three, and the reason I think there's a lot of facts that can lead up to the fact that it doesn't matter if there's a Democrat or Republican. Of course, they'll have different philosophies. But it's all a setup game. It's all a theatrical act already scripted out. You know the story that Trump was already declared president 10, 15 years ago when he was shown on The Simpsons coming down that escalator exactly the way he did before he won the presidency, right? That's not a coincidence. How would they know that? And why did he go down the escalator exactly the same? Because it's a theater. I've always said this, and we're just the extras. Yeah, and we don't even get paid. You go to Hollywood, at least they give you $50, $100 to sit there all day and twiddle your thumbs. But anyway, a setup. So we got Bush, George, the young man, not the father. He was quite a guy. We've done many shows on him. I can't spend the hour on him. But his son kind of ushered in this change in America with 9/11. Then I always say the cover-up in 9/11, if it is a cover-up, which there are facts to show that, is much more interesting than how they did it. Although it was a masterminded plan that they stuck to from the beginning. I mean, they never changed their story from 20 minutes after they already had people. In fact, it was so funny. I remember doing one story, and people forget about it probably. But they had uncovered. Now, they're supposedly the Muslims attacked, right? And those buildings were basically demolished, controlled demolition perhaps. But you know what? In the rubble on the sidewalk, they found a passport or an identification of one of the supposed pilots, and they gave the name already. And within a day, they had them all nailed to the wall, right? Give me a break. There are so many holes in that story. And I think it's wise for each of us to try to fill in those holes. But the people that say it's an inside job, isn't it interesting that the left and the right will agree that it wasn't? And the right then attacks the left for all these little crazy things. But they don't go to the deep stuff, right? Both of them on Ash Wednesday, whether you're on the left or the right, you'll put those ashes on your forehead. You'll bow to the Pope. Even though the past of the Vatican is filled with more blood on its hands than any organization in the world. And I will stand pat to this statement, that it's very difficult to uncover their wealth. But looking at their holdings and going to a website called Concordat.com, which lists all of the agreements, treaties, the Vatican is over 200 with countries. They have to be, if not the richest. They are the richest organization in the world. So why in the hell do you think politicians kiss the Pope's ring? What do you think? I think they do it because they like to follow the money and the leadership. And you know what? Those that don't seem to get killed. And there's a long line of presidents in America, a number of them, that have actually been assassinated by these people. Now, that's what gets overlooked by the left and the right. But you see, it gives you the idea that if these major things, if we can't even get to the truth of how Abraham Lincoln was killed on mainstream radio and mainstream TV, left or right, whatever you have, then we got a big problem. Because there are a lot of facts in that case that never get brought out by those people. And that's what I really am disturbed about. Now, somebody once said, and some of my listeners had said, boy, Greg, if your show and what you do should be listened by millions, it gives me a little bit of a, boost. That would with anybody, correct? But the idea of getting it listened by millions, you need an outlet. And I believe you need something more than just the internet. And the reason is that there are so many. There's no validity anymore to anything. Everything is up in the air. I mean, if you say one thing and provide the greatest, if you have a rock solid case and you offend the people in charge, somehow that story doesn't make it to the people you really want to reach. And that's the millions, the 63 million people that voted for Trump, the 6 million that voted for Clinton, who don't understand that if they voted for them, then they really don't understand the Hegelian dialectic. Go back to my show. I'll tell you my history of voting. And I can sum it up in a few words. I've never set foot in a voting booth in my life, and all of a sudden, the right wing goes, "Oh my God, you're not a patriot." And I counter with this. By not voting, I am much more the patriot than you are. Or at least equal. And the reason is, I don't think you've really understood what your country is all about yet. And I love this country. But the principles are what I love, not the people in charge of it who are manipulating all of us, using us as extras in a TV show that goes on and on and on, right? So the holidays are over. Oh, yes, holidays are over. They give, that's kind of like when, if you've ever been around Hollywood, like I have, they go into a respite around the holidays, All their shows break down, whether you're a grip or you're a lighting man or whether you're a star actor. You got a nice little vacation here because they don't want to do anything around the holidays. And that's similar to what goes on in Congress and the world strategists. They take that break, but they're ready with their opening scene. Their opening scene for the beginning of the year. And this year, they're going to that old enemy, Iran. This goes back. You're probably many of you not as old as I am, but it goes back, Jesus, I remember the 70s with Carter and all. I mean, this goes along. This has been going on for years, but it reaches a stage where, they have to do what I call a rerun, like Batman 2, Batman 3. This is like Iran 27, So they're really struggling, but they're using Iran now as a wedge. You're using Iran as a way to basically create chaos. Now, I remember 4 years ago, when Trump, almost 4 years ago, right when Trump was elected, on my show, I said, there's going to be a war before his first term is over. Now, it looks like I got a shot at this. Of predicting it, not that I want to. But, I can't really tell you if this will lead up to one. I know it's going to lead up to some bloodshed. The way it's going, I can't, unless they both, decide to shake hands. I think they ought to wrestle it off, get Khomeini and Trump into the big ring there, that circle they wrestle now, kickbox, and the winner take all. What the hell? There used to be a lot less lives lost. Now, so we got this new theatrical performance coming up this year. It's just started already, and let's just understand how this started. To understand that, we're going to have to go back at least to the Obama administration. And I got to Bush saying he ushered in this kind of New World Order push that his daddy talked about back in the 90s. And now we lead up to Obama after Bush, who took a completely different approach. First black American president, don't say anything bad or you're a racist. And his foreign policy, my friends, was so ridiculous. I mean, if you look at America, for an American leader to act the way he did was totally, mind-boggling. But what was his purpose? What were the powers that be at the top, the elite, the Vatican-led Jesuit New World Order, whatever? What did they have in mind with him? Well, that's what we're going to discuss, and it'll lead up to my discussion on Iran, as well as that announcement regarding my show. So stay tuned for more of the Investigative Journal after these messages.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app, for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
Okay, back as always for the second half hour. Greg Anthony here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. And I did have an announcement to make about my show before I get back to this great rerun theatrical performance on the world stage, what's going on in Iran. But anyway, I wanted to announce that my show will be airing on CRN Radio on Friday evenings from 6 to 8 p.m. Now, if you look at that station, there's a number of them. They have different channels, of course. It goes all over the place. And I'll be following a man by the name of Larry Elder and on the Salem Network. And people will say, well, how can your message get on with those typical conservative messages? And I say, well, you got to be smart. And you know, we're not gonna tamper down this show, make it any different. What we're gonna do is try to get to more people. And that's all. Try to get to more people. And so I'll be telling you more about that show. I want to also tell you that my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com will be changed and revamped for a little bit crisper look. And we're working on that right now. So we're not going to give up in this fight to expose the real controllers of the New World Order, including the Vatican Jesuit-led New World Order, and all of their minions spread all over the world. And it's an incredible story. And, you know, people say, well, what is this? Once you say Jesuit, you get this picture in your mind that you're talking about priests, and how could they be involved in the world stage of politics? And I said, you know, I felt the same way. I mean, if you read the definition of Jesuit, Jesuitism, Jesuitical teaching, learning, and basically how their Jesuitical ideas are spread throughout all of the world, at the high levels of college and universities. And you're going to hear a term called the ends justify the means. Well, wonder who coined that phrase. But anyway, so you're going to get that idea. You're going to get the definitions that you get in the dictionaries. And you're also going to have to look back to an old dictionary back in the early 1900s that really said a couple different things about the Jesuits than they do now. And they added the fact that they're involved in political intrigue. That's been taken out. Can't have that anymore. That's why in the beginning of my show I say the Supreme Command is watching you. And they are. They want you to think just like them. And if you don't, you're in trouble. And what I mean by in trouble is you don't have First Amendment rights anymore. You really don't. So I do agree with some of the right-wing journalists and radio broadcasters that the First Amendment is dead. Journalism is dead. But I'll tell you what. It isn't dead just because their ideas on the right are not exposed like most of the mainstream is a left-wing controlled organization. But it's also the factual ideas that are hidden from you that they don't even cover. The factual stories that many that we bring on this show that are never heard or given, 90th page on the New York Times or something. And if you really start looking at that, you're going to say, boy, First Amendment really never existed. Because this story has been being covered up for hundreds of years. And how can you have a freedom of speech, First Amendment, when all of this major stuff, major things that you can find factually that we've done in this show are covered up? I don't know why the left and the right haven't come to my rescue. How come? Well, they have an idea. Anything that falls out of their bailiwick, you're a conspiracy theorist. It's a great word. And it's, my idea of that is, yes, you're a conspiracy theorist, but you know what? Once you study these conspiracies, you'll find out that it should be on the mainstream news. It's not a conspiracy. The conspiracy lies there. And as it's interesting, the right wing right now is saying, the broadcasters are saying that everything the Democrats do, they accuse the right wing and the Republicans of doing, the Democrats are doing. Well, from my standpoint, where I consider the powers that be at both levels of the Republican and Democratic Party working together, and they work together in this respect. There's opposing views. They bring those opposing views together. They rub them together and fight and scream and yell and holler. And guess what? At the end, both of them get what they want. And really, what do they want? I cut to the chase. They want a country of America to be nothing more than a satellite country of Rome. And if you think I'm exaggerating, I'm not. And I guess I could put it another way. They just want to take everything that America has stood for and throw it out the window. And I suggest that this plan was put into place long before the Constitution was even signed. So we'll get to that at another time. So this idea of them working together, let's look at what's going on today in Iran and show you something that'll make your head spin when you think about it. And maybe you'll get a little closer to understanding or putting the facts together to show that they do work together. Okay. So we talked about Bush. Now we move to the Obama presidency. And what really, concerning Iran, what really happened there? Well, Obama, when he came in, it was kind of like he was the first black president. They choose them for a reason. Because, boy, any criticism of him, and the first thing they'll say is, you're a racist. You didn't want him there. But look at what his policies were probably some of the worst when you consider America first or America's interests that I've ever seen in my life. But the press just went right along with them, hop-stepping along. never criticizing, always lifting him up to this status of, oh, the first black American president. Well, I don't really care if a person is black, white, yellow, green, or whatever. Everybody, in my mind, I don't consider that color of their skin. Okay? I like black dogs, I like white dogs, I like blue dogs. I mean, you know what I'm getting at. But anyway, so what we have is Obama coming in and apologizing. I mean, this guy took away a lot of the military money. He did nothing as far as supporting American interests overseas. He basically was selling away America. And, behind the scenes, people are going, oh, that's so cool. He wants to talk to everybody. The real point is he wasn't talking. He was apologizing for America's actions over the years. Okay, so many people may say, okay, America has been imperialistic in certain areas, but that's not the role of a president, right? You're here to protect the American people. But Obama seemed to be protecting the interests of the world more than us, right? More than the American people. And you can go through policy after policy, and you can see his domestic policy. He didn't really want to see people get into business and get, and live the American dream, right? But his foreign policies were even more mystifying to me, and especially concerning Iran. What he did with Iran was next to treasonous in my mind. He gave them $150 billion, and people say, well, that was their money. Oh, really? The money was held, that 150 from what I understand, because they're a terrorist organization killing Americans and people all over the world, right? Now, he gave them that, plus he gave them, $450 million in cash on a plane sent overnight. And the justification was that we entered into a nuclear deal with the world and Iran, that they're only going to do a certain amount of nuclear testing, and they can't do this, they can't do that. The only thing was there was no controls on it. It was probably, in my estimation, and I agree with the right wing on this, the worst agreement ever made. I mean, it gave them all that money to do what? Build up terrorism. What do you think they did with that money? So what happened here was Obama was tearing down America and building up our enemies. Then Trump gets in, and he does just the opposite. He builds up our military and basically stands strong against our enemies, correct? Completely opposite view. But that's how they operate. They got to tear it down, and then they build it up. Now, they've given our enemies a lot more strength through Obama. And now, maybe the big climax, right? We can have a bigger conflict in the Middle East that's been going on for God knows how many years. Did you ever wonder why we were in Afghanistan for now, 18 years? I should do a whole hour again, and I'll go back to some of my old shows, because it has to do with the poppy fields. It has to do with controlling the drugs being grown. And if you want to dispute me on this, we'll get to the facts on how this really operates over there. And if you remember, remember the soldier who was a football player who went over there that came back and they said he died from friendly fire? I think it was something else. And I think he understood that they weren't over there just to, supposedly fight terrorists. They were there to protect the poppy fields. You say, oh, impossible. Oh, well, it's been going on for a long time. They used to do it in another country, but the climate changed and they lost a lot of money, so they moved it over to Afghanistan. So, anyway, the embassy gets attacked. We see now, how do I know they work together? Well, look at what Obama does the exact opposite. Trump comes in, and so they're all basically working together to get their final goal. Okay? Now, the two embassies. What are the things that happened in Obama's administration that are similar to what happened in Trump's administration? It just happened yesterday. Well, of course, they just attacked the U.S. Embassy, right? And Trump, what did he do? He took immediate action. He responded to the embassy attack quickly, and with, American forces were there within hours. Nobody was killed. And then a day later, they kill what some call the biggest terrorist and one of the biggest terrorists in the world, Qasem Soleimani. And others call him a revered general. And that's both in our country. Now in Iran right now, they're mourning his death, and hundreds of thousands of people are protesting. And he was killed in a raid by a drone from our intelligence a day after, because of what was to be other imminent attacks, and also what he's been doing over the years. And they've totaled up a lot of numbers as far as how many people he's killed with terrorism, not only in American lives, but lives all over the Middle East. And if Trump didn't respond, it would be considered weakness, right? And that's not what's going on now. The game they're playing, or the theatrical scene we're watching, because this is orchestrated, I believe, is completely opposite than what Obama did. Now, what happened with Obama? Remember Benghazi? Okay. The embassy was attacked. The house of the ambassador who was visiting was attacked. I think it was September 11th, wasn't it? Yeah. Coincidence. And guess what? There were this embassy area and the ambassador's house was not fully protected by military. There were a handful of American contractors there, former military. And when they sieged, and when the terrorists came and started to burn down the house of the ambassador, there were like 6 or 7 people there. They wanted to go immediately to help and to save some lives, but they were given a stand-down order from our military. In fact, they were given 3 or 4. Finally, they disobeyed, went there, and did all they could, but the ambassador had already been killed, and several others. So then the siege went over back to their compound, the embassy compound, and guess what? Hours are passing and no troops are coming. Now, Clinton, who was the Secretary of State at the time, knew about it for hours and hours and hours. And they said, they were asked, why didn't you go to help? You got planes and, Apache helicopters hours away. You could have been there in a couple hours. What happened? And they said, well, we thought it was a video. Well, it got worse. And the American military never came. And the movie was made called 19 Hours, I believe. And it talked about some of the people that were there who survived. A number of the contractors were killed. They said there was no, 1925, a day passes. Nobody came. The military never came. And finally, everything de-escalated, and they were flown out not by an American plane, but by a Syrian airplane. The Americans never came under Obama. Now, if that's not weakness, what is? So he was there to embolden our enemies. Trump is now going to fight against them. And so they're leading up to this volatile situation we're in right now. And it's a theater scene that's playing out on the world stage. The reason I call it theater is because it is. It's orchestrated. However, the extras involved in this are real people, and real people will get killed. Now, how far this will escalate to is only, we'll see in a matter of days. But right now, after this drone strike killed Soleimani, Iran has vowed a hard response, a drastic response. And today, or when was it, Sunday, they backed out of the nuclear deal with the other countries. Europe was still involved in this thing that was never really enforced anyway. And they said publicly, now we can just do what we want. And so they've said they have some 32 sites they're looking at for a hard and deadly response. Trump comes back and says he's got 52 spots that he wants to hit. And so we're going to see what plays out. But isn't it something that, I guess I'm going to quote somebody here, okay? And let me see what David Rubin, you may not be aware of who he is, but he was a former mayor of Shiloh, Israel. He speaks all over the place in different radio shows and things. And he wrote a book called The Trump and the Jews. And basically, he was also a victim of an attack by a Muslim terrorist and his 3-year-old son. He's since founded an organization called the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund. And he explained it this way. He said he was driving home from Jerusalem with his 3-year-old son when his car was ambushed by Muslim terrorists who were perched on the side of a road with an AK-47 assault rifles. He was shot in the leg, and my son was shot in the head. In fact, the bullet that went into his head and through his neck missed his brainstem by 1 millimeter. In short, and I'll quote him, I eventually, says David, managed to restart the car, to get away from the terrorists, and to get to the hospital where we had several operations over a span of several months. But the psychological trauma that his son experienced caused him to start the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund for the purpose of creating integrative therapeutic educational programs to heal the trauma of thousands of Israeli children and to restore some of the lost innocence of childhood to their young lives. Wow. So it's real. People die. And how many are going to die now with this escalation, de-escalation, or whatever? You see, with Obama, many people were dying then with a completely opposite view. Now Trump is coming in, and the same thing, but I believe, he's got no choice right now because he's been given that choice. I should say, not given that choice. He's been ordered. This is orchestrated. It can't be any other way. And that's where I kind of differ with the people on the left and, of course, the right, who are always fighting against each other. Spending, hours and days and months. All they're talking about is impeachment. I mean, it's insane while this is going on. What do you think? They're distracting you now? Get this big build-up, and for the next couple of weeks, this is all you're going to hear. And we'll see where it goes, right? Well, anyway, where will it go? That's a question that, you had to look a little bit, because I call this not only a war on terror. There is terrorism, but it's when you use the word faked, and then some people like to do that, faked war on terror, saying that I like to say it's an orchestrated war on terror, which means that it's actually real, but it wouldn't happen unless the snowball that was on the top of the mountain didn't get pushed by somebody, and there wasn't this instigation by a power that is never understood. And that's what we do here. And with these terror organizations, you got to go back to my show where I talk about ISIS, why they named it ISIS. Who is ISIS? Once you start looking into that, the thing you're going to do is want to chop down all those obelisks that are in London and the White House, outside of Washington, our symbol of freedom, supposedly, the one in the Vatican. You want to cut those down because they have no correlation to freedom whatsoever. Now, looking at an article here, I want to just look at this for a minute. It's from Islam and Bible Prophecy. It's a Christian station or a Christian website. And I found it interesting over the years when you start looking at the real controllers of the New World Order. You start talking about the papacy and not only their pedophilia and all of the crazy stuff they do there in Vatican City. When you start talking about the Jesuits and their influence in world politics and the world stage, then it gets pretty dicey. People kind of drop off the bus. But when you talk about Islam in prophecy, it discusses, according to this article, the supposed war on terror, which is designed to take control of countries which really have not bowed down to the authority of the people we talk about here, the Jesuit Vatican-led New World Order. And that doesn't just leave out, the people, the political people. Wow, this half hour went so fast. I looked at the clock. God, I could have talked for another hour here. But you know what? The story, yes, I can continue it tomorrow. Why don't we leave it there? Because I only got 30 seconds. And I also want to introduce tomorrow a new advertiser, and that's UniteThePeople.org. And they are a prison reform group that has agreed to advertise on my show, and I appreciate it. So anyway, we'll get to that tomorrow. Thanks for listening. You're listening to The Greg Anthony Show, and it's called The Investigative Journal here. And I'll be back tomorrow on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.